I never really paid much attention to Charlie Kirk, and honestly, neither should you have been forced to, because in truth, Donald Trump himself didn't seem to care as much as he wanted everyone to believe. We were told that the political left had to somehow apologize for calling out extremism and bigotry, all because Trump was supposedly heartbroken over the passing of his close friend. But his actions told a different story. During the elaborate funeral that drew national attention, Trump's focus appeared to be elsewhere, on himself, his image, and the spectacle surrounding the event. Reports even suggest that his behavior toward the family wasn't exactly compassionate, and now that very insincerity seems to have caught up with him during a rather awkward Medal of Freedom ceremony held in honor of Charlie Kirk, where things took an unexpected turn. In a moment that shocked many, Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, appeared to subtly mock Donald Trump during the event, turning what was supposed to be a unifying tribute into yet another uncomfortable headline. We're going to break it all down and talk about why this matters, because it perfectly captures the chaos that continues to follow Trump's public appearances. But before we dive into that, if you could take a second to like this video and subscribe if you haven't already, it really helps support our work. Now let's start with how Trump opened his speech, by attacking his critics and labeling the political left as the devil.
Nothing could have ever supplanted this. It's incredible the way people are talking about him. And with great love. I mean, I read so many stories about some of the enemies, but I watch the enemies, and it's hard for them to speak badly about him because they just don't. And then you do have people in the days since Charlie's killing, we've seen exactly why our country so dearly needed his example. We've watched legions of far-left radicals resort to desperate acts of violence and terror because they know that their ideas and arguments are persuading no one. They know that they're failing. They have the devil's ideology, and they're failing, and they know it. They feel it, and they become violent. They seem to become very violent on the left. They've rammed vehicles into federal law enforcement, fired sniper rifles at ICE agents, and me, you know. But I made a turn at a good time. I made a turn at a good time. I turned to the right. Charlie couldn't believe it, actually. He said, "How the hell did you make that turn?" I said, "I don't know."
For weeks now, we've been hearing claims that the political left is somehow out of control, that our words are dangerous, that we're dehumanizing others, and that our rhetoric is putting people at risk. But then, ahead of what is expected to be one of the largest peaceful protests in years, the No King's Day demonstrations on October 18th, Donald Trump takes the stage and describes his critics as devils, paid agitators, and people tearing the country apart. Let's be honest, language like that can absolutely fuel division and increase tensions. It sets the stage for anger and hostility, and that's the last thing this country needs right now. Yet, for Trump, that chaos often seems to be the point, the spectacle, the distraction, the drama. And let's be clear, this moment wasn't really about Charlie Kirk or honoring his legacy. If Trump truly cared about that, he wouldn't be using such inflammatory stories and language in the middle of a memorial setting.
Enforcement fired sniper rifles at ICE agents, and me, you know. But I made a turn at a good time. I made a turn at a good time. I turned to the right. Charlie couldn't believe it, actually. He said, "How the hell did you make that turn?" I said, "I don't know."
At this point, it's honestly hard to take any of this seriously. We're being asked to mourn someone who built an entire career on mocking and belittling others, especially women of color, dismissing their intelligence and humanity for profit. And then, during what's supposed to be a solemn moment of remembrance, Donald Trump, ever focused on himself, decides to tell a story about how he narrowly avoided danger while speaking about a man who actually lost his life to violence. Just think about that. The self-absorption is astonishing. The lack of empathy, the inability to focus on anyone but himself, it's deeply unsettling. And what's even more disturbing is how we're now being told that it's somehow our responsibility to honor or carry on this person's so-called legacy. But what legacy are we even talking about? A legacy of division, intolerance, and cruelty. That's not something to celebrate, and the fact that Donald Trump wants that to be the takeaway says everything.
5 weeks ago, our nation was robbed of this extraordinary champion. He was a champion in every way. I got to know him so well. He didn't like losing, and he was able to fight people that were enemies, and he didn't necessarily love those enemies so much. You know, I heard he loved his enemies, and I said, wait a minute, is that the same Charlie that I know? I'm not sure, but I didn't want to get into it.
Donald Trump seems to hold a very specific image of Charlie Kirk in his mind. Someone who mirrored his own attitude, confrontational, divisive, and unapologetically harsh. Trump tends to see reflections of himself in the people around him rather than recognizing them as individuals with their own values and complexities. He often projects his own traits, the qualities he admires or wants reinforced, onto others. In that sense, he wanted Charlie Kirk to be remembered as a fighter, someone who matched his same intensity and style. But that's not the legacy that Erica Kirk, Charlie's widow, wanted to highlight. In fact, she took the opportunity to shift the tone, and even lightly poked fun at Trump during her remarks, saying this.
Surprisingly enough, he did pray for his enemies, which is very hard, but he did. He did. He did. No one else, I mean, I saw him do it. No, he never did it in front of anyone else, but I can attest to that. But he also loved people when it was inconvenient. And he ran his race with endurance, and he kept the faith. And now he wears the crown of a righteous martyr. And for me and for our children, the truth really steadies our grief, because heaven gained what earth could no longer contain.
How much do you have to misstep for the widow at a remembrance event, one that you organized, to turn the moment into a subtle critique of you? That's exactly what happened with Donald Trump and Erica Kirk. She gently corrected him, saying, actually, Donald, he did pray for people. Now, I'll be honest. I've had my doubts about that narrative since the beginning. During the memorial service, I said then what I'll say now. This sudden tone of forgiveness and grace doesn't match what we've previously heard. There was a time when Erica Kirk's message was very different, one full of fire and warnings toward those she saw as political opponents. But that tone changed once the circumstances shifted. And look, people are entitled to grieve in their own way, but it's also fair to point out when grief becomes a brand. Because let's be real, raising millions of dollars by building on a legacy rooted in controversy isn't exactly what most would call mourning. That's marketing. As for Donald Trump, compassion here feels misplaced. He doesn't appear to seek it. And even if he did, his focus continues to be, as always, squarely on himself.
Moments Charlie testified to the greatness of America and to the glory of our Savior, with whom he now rests in heaven. And he is going to make heaven. I said, I'm not sure I can make it, but he's going to make it. He's there. He's looking down on us right now. It's so incredible. Look at this, how this turned out. This was supposed to be so dark and cloudy. Not dark and cloudy, is it? Look at that, how beautiful that is. There's no artist that can capture it as beautiful as it is today. Wow.
It's almost ironic how often Donald Trump has been talking about heaven lately, only to start wondering whether Charlie Kirk is there. In Trump's mind, Heaven seems like a place filled with gold, applause, and people constantly telling him how great he is. And if he imagined Charlie's version of heaven, he'd probably still picture himself at the center because that's how he views everything, through his own reflection. The truth is, Trump doesn't really seem to understand concepts like peace, empathy, or love. His entire worldview is built on resentment and retribution. It's not about faith, it's about attention. And let's be honest, I'm not going to feel sympathy for those who helped create the very culture they now regret. Charlie Kirk repeatedly dismissed empathy. He stood against basic common sense reforms that could have prevented the cycle of gun violence that continues to devastate communities. He argued that those tragedies were an unfortunate but acceptable price for protecting absolute gun rights. Yet when genuine government overreach occurred, when families were torn apart and people were detained and mistreated, he didn't stand up. He didn't speak out. He aligned himself with power and used his platform to reinforce it. And now, once again, Donald Trump is trying to stir up that same kind of outrage, the same emotional chaos, to serve himself.
And that's why I said last month that I have directed the Attorney General and the Department of Homeland Security to confront the very real threat of left-wing terrorism in our country. It's a real threat. Not when you confront it, it's not, because they're not brave people. In fact, they're cowards. When you confront them, they immediately fold. You have to see them fold. You have to see them crying. They fold. But it includes dismantling the networks that fund them and finance them, and we're finding out who those networks are. We already know quite a few of them. When you see these violent incidents and then you see people holding this gorgeous sign with beautiful wood, beautiful cardboard, wood, everything's perfect paint job, and they're all the same, there are thousands of them, you know that they weren't made in the basement out of love. They were made by anarchists, and in some cases wealthy. I'll probably find some of my nice friends that are up there being so nice to me, especially lately. They're being very nice. But it surprises you who they may be, and you almost wonder why would they do it? But they're hurting our country, and we're really taking...
I have to point out again, they know that the No Kings protest is coming up. They are well aware of that. Why do you think that they're talking about the left in these terms again? It's because they understand that there's going to be lots of us out there, and they want us to be afraid, and they want to sick their goons on us, and they want to say that it's our language that's dangerous, right? Well, let's actually take a look at some right-wing language from the Gen Z Republicans that just came out in a Politico article. Leaked Young Republicans group chat includes racial slurs Hitler praise. Quote, "If we ever had a leak of this chat, we would be cooked. Some of the most extreme voices on the far right, people who proudly promote hateful and dangerous ideas, are once again showing their true colors online. These groups have been posting messages praising one of history's worst figures, openly spreading rhetoric that has no place in any civilized society. What's worse is that they're doing it while trying to twist the language of the left, the language of justice and equality, to justify their hate. And through all of this, Donald Trump continues to make statements that only fuel and encourage that same kind of dangerous extremism.
They come in from Indiana, they come in from Iowa, they come from Florida to see their nation's capital, and somebody would have to call the parents, "I'm sorry, but your son or your daughter's been killed." Not anymore. You hear those sirens going off? That's good. That's a good sound. That means they either got the bad guy or they're going to stop the bad guy. You didn't hear that sound because nobody wanted to do anything. Nobody. Listen to the beauty of that sound. Seriously. And that's the real deal sirens. They're not politically correct sirens. You hear them, they're about 3 miles away. That's great. What a beautiful sound. They're stopping crime. That's what they're doing.
Donald Trump is trying to tighten his grip on power. He's pushing to control the state. to target his critics, and to use every tool he can to silence dissent. That's political intimidation, and I'm going to call it out. This is a turning point for me. A tone shift. We're not staying silent anymore. We're not backing down from the truth. If you stand with that message, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. And if you've watched to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I will see you soon.